first of all, are you surprised, Mr. Zhao? The project was halted, and now are you surprised that the project eventually goes on?
I was not particularly surprised by the decision to delay the go-ahead with the nuclear power plant. Mrs. May, the new UK Prime Minister, was well known for her suspicion against Chinese investment in general, and particularly regarding Chinese investment into a critical infrastructure of UK. So I'm not really surprised.
So what do you think, Professor Hogg? Is a change of heart or is a change of ideas only for now?
I think it was exceptional circumstances. I mean, the Brexit vote that led to the change of Prime Minister was not expected widely in the UK. So I think at the time that Theresa May became Prime Minister and made that decision not to immediately press ahead in July, that was a result of a time of great political change here in the UK. And I think the reason for her wishing to take another look at it goes beyond just the investment. I mean, there's a lot of technical risk as well associated with Hinkley Point C. You know, it uses the Areva EPR reactor technology that's been currently being deployed in a small number of units that are being constructed worldwide, and they've all got problems. So I think it was more than just the investment profile of the project that caused a rethink. And the good news is, after a relatively short number of weeks, the decision to go ahead has been made. So it clearly was just taking stock, having a relook at the project and deciding to go ahead anyway, rather than some major rethink over the Chinese investment in particular.
Ms. Yu, do you think all the problems originally thought could be the challenge and now have been resolved? Or we'll let the project go ahead anyway?
I don't think the problem has been resolved at all, actually. As I agree with Professor Hogg, such a project is extremely complicated. It involves 3 national governments, together with the trade unions, civil societies, then numerous of vested interest groups within this game, and therefore Theresa May, by delaying it, by delay, is just trying to show a gesture. She's different from the previous government, and she listened to the public, and she listened to what people want.
After that gesture, what's next? That's the important question, isn't it? Let's take a look at some of the points that supporters of the project have been making over the years, that it will create thousands of jobs. For example, construction work will create around 25,000 jobs. 5,600 people will be needed on the site during the peak construction times, and the finished power plant will employ about 900 people. Mr. Zhao, here in Beijing. Of course, all of these numbers could be just predictions. And you could have debates and arguments coming from all different kinds of interest groups, for or against it. They could all be of different kinds of interest groups. So what eventually do you think fundamentally is in the decision-making process?
Well, first of all, we talk about the job numbers. Those are not insignificant numbers, especially when the UK, in the aftermath of Brexit, is facing an increasingly uncertain economic future. And France will be an important partner in the future UK-EU negotiation for the terms to leave the European Union. And China is a very important potential investor for UK. The UK government has been running on deficit for a little while. So it cannot afford to lose an important investor like China. And ultimately speaking, UK does need nuclear reactors to produce baseload renewable energy. All the other renewable sources like wind, solar does not provide stable sources of renewable and low carbon energy. So UK has to keep its nuclear projects going. And therefore, despite the political displeasure of Mrs. May towards Chinese investment, she has to go ahead with this project.
Ms. Yu, under the current circumstances, there seems to be, at least according to Mr. Zhao, a reluctance to restart it, and yet all circumstances has led to this decision. Then what's likely to be ahead whenever we have any challenge, whether it's large or small, during the process of this project? Will this once again be an on and off project, politically speaking?
Well, I think it's a huge political risk in here. It will be like unexpected turns, twists and turns happen within this project continuously. But I agree with Mr. Zhao on two things. Firstly, Theresa May has to consider how she is going to deal with his old-time partner France, i.e. the UK-French relation. And secondly, how is she going to deal with the emerging partner, China and the UK? In this case, part of the argument being made by those Brexiteers is really on try to promote UK's economic ties with non-EU country. Therefore, I believe China will come on the very top of the list, and therefore Theresa May will continue emphasizing its relation with China.
Let me come back to you before I go to Professor Hogg in London. Let me come back to you, Mr. Zhao, here in Beijing. Why is China always wanting to be this really reluctant partner of the others? I mean, China put in a lot of money. There are political risks for China to invest in this money. Of course, China wants to have projects all over the world, but not necessarily only in the UK. It's not going to help China's market when it comes to a large percentage point. So why is China always willing to be this reluctant partner, even though some despise, quote unquote, you, and some distrust you, and some only need you when you are rich with money? Is that only about cash?
Yes, it's a sad fact that Chinese companies always face unjust and even discriminatory treatment in foreign investment, like Huawei and ETZ did in previous cases. But I think China is having a very pragmatic approach in facing this challenge.
What is that?
China understands, as a rising power, foreign countries might have initial suspicions about China's political intentions behind these economic deals. And it will take time for China to convince foreign partners that its products will be reliable and its services will be credible. So it's, people fear because they don't know. So I think Mrs. May, as time passes, as she gets more opportunities to learn more about China, to work more closely with her Chinese counterpart, will also change her attitude, just as her predecessor David Cameron did during the previous administration.
I would like to invite your wisdom here, Professor Hogg. Help us to understand the situation. Will it always be in a way, questioning process toward the China investment all throughout this project?
I think there's two aspects to this. One is the Chinese investment, the money, and the other aspect is technology. And in the case of Hinkley, it's Chinese investment to allow the project to go ahead that we're talking about, not using Chinese technology at Hinkley. Therefore, I think the delay that we've recently had was more to do with the fact that it was overseas in investment rather than it specifically being China in that particular case. I mean, if you turned the project around and said that it was a UK bankrolling a project in China to contribute nuclear electricity to your national grid, you would want to do due diligence and make sure that you were happy that the contracting terms were secure enough that you could keep sufficient level of
you would do the assessment report sometimes, but not repeatedly.
Over who was contributing to your grid supply.
Right. And Professor Hogg, I'm not here at all to fan up any kinds of nationalism through this kind of discussion. I'm really trying to describe a realistic picture that we are seeing these days, that China could be a great contributor to different kinds of economy, particularly at this critical juncture when economies around the world are restructuring themselves. And yet there has been reluctance and suspicion toward the Chinese investment. This project is only one of those many examples. So from your perspective, Professor Hogg, what to do next for both sides?
Well, I think the good news is this project is going ahead. So there was a short review, but let's not lose sight of the fact that that having got through that latest review, the project is going ahead. So the government is happy with the financing structure for this project, including the Chinese investment. And still, the follow-on project, potentially the next large nuclear project at Bradwell, that is still very much in a position where the UK government is moving ahead towards that project. So I think where you see suspicion, I would see UK government doing due diligence, and I think there's enough indications there that we're very happy to work with the Chinese on our nuclear power and on other large infrastructure projects as well, but it needs to be done in a carefully risk-controlled manner, and I think that's what you're seeing here.
Before the Brexit negotiation, we know it's coming up in the next few months. It's going to be a huge test for Prime Minister May and her team. Ms. Yu, how much would this project and the stability or stabilizing process of this project under construction, working together among all the parties, mean to her when it comes to her capability, political capability and credibility in the Brexit negotiations?
Well, I think obviously she
I
takes
think
one
it will
step back
certainly
over July.
help.
Yeah, Ms.
So-
Yu, please.
Oh, right, okay, sorry. I think obviously this certainly would help her because she took one step back in July already and give her careful thoughts and then come forward and tell us they prefer to carry over this project. So it shows she carefully calculate how much benefit and causes within this project. And secondly, this also make her to answer the big question to her French partner, because don't forget, China was only the minor shareholder for this project, where the French government, which is the major shareholder for this project, and EDF accounting for 85% of the shareholding actually owned by the French government from the EDF. So Theresa May become the best friend with the French in this case, and therefore could lay a very good foundation for her when it comes to the real Brexit negotiation process. So I think it's very wise for her to do so, and it's justified.
Right. And Professor Hogg, very briefly from you, you were saying?
Well, I think I more or less agree with those comments as well, that it does strengthen her hand. I think that the major concerns around Brexit here in the UK are around jobs in particular and the damage that Brexit could do to our ability to export into Europe. So to have major projects, okay, Europe's involved through the French, but the project is protected to some extent from Brexit. And to have a major UK infrastructure project going ahead with investment from outside of Europe, I think it can be nothing but good for Theresa May at this time.
Well, Mr. Zhao, before we go, I do have this very important question for you. The last administration with Mr. Cameron as the Prime Minister, there were enormous amount of deals being signed or reached between Chinese government and the British government then. And of course, with the change of administration, it seems a lot of things have changed. The question is, when China is doing business around the world, how much credibility should China also ask to its own business partners around the world? And meanwhile, adjust itself to different kinds of election and political cycles maturely enough to deal with it?
Well, I don't think there's much.
I heard a long sigh from you.
Yeah, I don't think there's much that China can ask. I think China is simply adapting to this fact that policies of foreign governments do change and sometimes change very dramatically. So China, its job is to convince its foreign partners that its technology is safe, secure, reliable. It's a very respectful and trustworthy partner. Going forward, if we go back to the UK nuclear power project, which is very important for China's nuclear industry to go into a market of the developed countries. So that means more for China than other ordinary projects. So in this case, China will be even more patient and pragmatic.